circumstances involved are important. To quote Phil Smith, a United Mine Workers Union spokesman in a recent Bloomberg article, citations can range from leaving tools in the wrong place to methane buildups. Most citations, roughly about 60%, are written for violations that the inspectors themselves judge to involve non-serious or non-substantial items. Importantly, under the MSHA system, abatement is also mandatory. Even if the citation is going to be contested, it must first be corrected. The large majority of violations are corrected the same day and often immediately. For those that require more time to correct, a deadline is given by the inspector. The company has no choice in the matter and must follow the directive of the inspector. It can contest the citation, but it'll take months or years for the contest to be heard. I think the essential point here is that the equipment or mine area does not operate while a cited hazard exists. It has to be corrected before the mine is or equipment is permitted to begin operation again. One final comment is that companies suffer two financial penalties when they incur a violation. The first is the fine, but the larger penalty is usually the loss of production that often takes place while the violation is being rectified. Now, with that as the background, let's discuss UBB specifically. UBB had about an average number of violations in the 2009-2010 period when compared to a very roughly peer group of mines in Appalachia. It did have a very large number of what are termed D orders, which are the most serious types of violations, with 47 recorded in the 7 months between April through October in 2009. Massey has a hazard elimination committee comprised of its top managers and chaired by its chief operating officer, which requires every violation to be investigated and reported upon. Weekly, it reviews new violations and decides upon actions that should be taken, including the disciplining of Massey members if necessary. Recognizing the problems at UBB, in 2009, the group assigned 2 safety professionals to work full-time in the UBB mine. From November 1 through April 4th, there were only 7 D orders issued at UBB, and that compares to the 47 that had been ordered in the previous 7 months. This represents an 80% reduction in this rate from the previous 7 months. I'll also point out that from January 1 to April 4, 2010, there were no lost time accidents at the UBB mine. In fact, MSHA had its quarterly closeout meeting with UBB management just a few days prior to the explosion and determined that there were no major issues existing at the mine and that the mine was in good condition. Again, D orders are the most serious type of violation. I'll just note that the number of D orders can make a situation look worse than it is. And this is because of the MSHA, the way the mine law is written. When a D order is issued, the mine falls under the rules of what's called the D sequence, or some people will call it the D chain. Under these rules, another violation of a similar nature that occurs within the next 90 days must also be written as a D order, even though it would otherwise or ordinarily have been written as a routine violation. So each new order then extends the D chain for another 90 days. In 2009, the Upper Big Branch mine was on several of these D sequences. Now I'd like to turn to the mine at the time of the explosion and talk about it. Shortly before the explosion, the 3 foremen on the working sections that were affected called out their pre-shift examinations as required by law. No hazards were found, and methane measurements range from 0 to nearly 0, a max of 0.3%. There was no indication of a dangerous condition, yet only a few tens of minutes later, the explosion occurred. 2 other sections were working in the mine, but at some distance from the 3 affected by the explosion. The 32 miners in these other areas made it out of the mine with no injuries. The explosion did not extend to that area. At the 3 affected working sections, we have determined that the 2 continuous miner crews had stopped production. They were in the process of coming out of the mine. We do not know if the longwall was producing coal at the time of the explosion. It's important to note that the longwall at UBB was not operating with the same ventilation system that it began with in September 2009. MSHA required us to change that system, and Massey complied. Recognizing that professionals can reasonably disagree on the best method of ventilation at a mine, we have discovered the following. 1, that MSHA required several changes since September 2009 that made the ventilation in the area significantly more complex. 2, that the volume of fresh air to the face was significantly reduced during this period. And 3, that our engineers resisted making the changes, in one instance to the point of shutting down production for 2 days before agreeing to MSHA's ventilation plan changes. Now, shortly before, I want to point out, though, that shortly before the explosion occurred on April 5th, the air volume on the longwall was measured at about twice the minimum required under the mining law, and methane was not detected at the working phase. We still do not know the specific cause of the explosion, and Massey is running its own internal investigation to find out what caused this explosion, in addition to continuing to fully cooperate with all federal and state regulatory agencies involved in these investigations. The company is committed to working together to determine the cause of the accident and to preventing it from ever happening again. In conclusion, I've been involved in mining my whole career at many levels. I've worked alongside miners and alongside inspectors, and I appreciate that each has a job to do. And we're all in this together, and we're all committed to making the industry safer and determining what the facts were in this tragedy. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can begin with the question and answer session now. If anyone has a question. Yes, sir. Would you need a mic and maybe identify yourself as well?
I'm Dave Farenthold from the Washington Post. I wanted to ask the folks that went in, the safety consultants that went into UBB in 2009 to mitigate those deorders, what did they find? What was the reason for that high number of deorders, and what did they do to stop it?
Go ahead. Well, let Stan answer that if you'd like.
No. First of all, they were not safety consultants. They were actually Massey employees. And you know, I'm not certain. I don't have the details on what they found. All that we know is that they seem to have done an awfully good job of making sure that things were proper, and whatever had been causing the problems. So, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of